85% of their losses were out of this particular portion of the portfolio. If we look at the magnitude of it, it was $1.8 trillion worth of junk loans that they basically underwrote. And of course, the unsustainable growth in the junk loan market and what it was doing to bid up prices in real estate was one of the worries that the Fed had. And if you recall back then, the Federal Reserve came to Congress and warned us that we faced a systemic risk to the financial system. And if you'll recall, Chris Dodd and the fight Chuck Hagel had with Chris Dodd in the Senate, Hagel got the legislation out of the Senate to do something about the over-leveraging of these portfolios. He had the legislation that the Federal Reserve had requested, and he got it out of committee, but Chris Dodd blocked it on the floor with the help of the lobby from Fannie and Freddie. And here on the House side, I carried the amendment on the House floor. But again, the lobby from Fannie and Freddie were very, very powerful. And as a result, the words, the warnings of the Federal Reserve were unheeded. The meltdown began in our housing market with a result of what was happening here with Fannie and Freddie. And so, had we won that fight then, our economy would be in far better shape than it is today. Had we won that fight, we would not be here asking the administration to simply recognize the costs associated with this Washington failure. But my concern is that we have to learn the lessons of the past, and I would hope also that Congress would learn in the future that bullying the market and trying to give direction to the market, especially with respect to mandates on government-sponsored enterprises, is a very, very dangerous thing to do. Thank you.
I'm Michelle Bachman from Minnesota 6th Congressional District. I too want to commend my colleague Scott Garrett, one of the brightest bulbs here in the United States Congress, for having the temerity to look at this issue and bring accountability. It's important that we level with the American people. As my colleagues have already stated, all roads have led to Freddie and Fannie and the current financial meltdown situation that we've been continuing to deal with. We have to level with the American people as to what's going on. Remember, Fannie and Freddie were private businesses. They've now been nationalized. So they're now owned by us, the American people. So it's imperative that we have this level of accounting, especially because, as was stated earlier, Treasury Secretary Geithner had said on Christmas, as a big Christmas present to Freddie and Fannie, that they would have an unlimited, taxpayer-financed, open checkbook to continue to bail out these two organizations. We still have not seen any changes in the loans that are being made and the obligations that are being incurred by Freddie and Fannie. At minimum, it is within our purview and our fiduciary responsibility as members of Congress to ensure that this information is on the books for the federal government, and also that we're leveling with the people that we serve. So I commend Scott Garrett for this wonderful bill, and I'm very pleased that that he asked me to sign on.
Thank you. Hi, Chris Lee from Western New York. When Mr. Garrett came out with this bill, I was glad to become a part of it. What I'm hearing from my constituents is they want Congress to start dealing with reality. Reality starts with, let's look at what our financial situation is. Prior to coming to Congress, I was in the private sector, ran a business. And I can assure you, if I had an accountant who ran the way the GSEs are and how they're recording their debt, heads would roll. It's that simple. We have to, as leading this country, we have to start dealing with reality. And the fact that we are showing these huge liabilities off balance sheet is a serious problem. American public wants answers. They want this country to be stable and get our arms around the debt so that future generations are not the ones having to pay for this. So again, this is something that brings transparency. The administration keeps talking about that fact, but they say one thing and are doing another. I'm pleased that Congressman Garrett is trying to do something positive for the American people. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Leonard Glantz from North Central New Jersey. Scott Garrett and I have been involved in many battles together as members of the state legislature. where we served for a dozen years in Trenton. And I am pleased that Scott has asked me to be a co-sponsor of this important legislation. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are at the heart of what's wrong with the United States in this terrible recession, and really at the center of the debacle that has occurred. The Christmas Eve decision to make this unlimited is really greatly disturbing, and I would hope that the American people would concentrate on that. And OMB should do what CBO has suggested. This is true across the board, and it is certainly true regarding Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. When we take control of Congress, as we will in January, we will be fully transparent. And the fight now before the American people is whether the 21st century will be a second American century, as the 20th century was, or whether we will go the route of nations in the past in fiscal irresponsibility. In so many areas, the challenges that confront us are based upon a fiscally irresponsible future, as is now the case. And I am always pleased to join with my colleague and friend of many years standing, Scott Garrett, and let's pass this legislation to make sure that we do the right thing regarding Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Thank you very much.
And with that, if there are any questions, yes.
Congressman, have you sought and do you expect any Democratic support for this?
We're always open to Democrat support, and we just actually will be dropping the bill in today, and we have, as we speak, at least one member of the other side of the aisle who has indicated a preference to sign on with the legislation as well. So we hope that grows, and I hope it actually expands even further than that. As Jeb pointed out, in reality, we don't need this legislation to accomplish what everyone up here wants to accomplish. As Jeb pointed out, the administration could do this right now. We would hope that in light of the promises that they have been making for a long time, that they want to address the entire issue of the GSEs, although they failed to do that all last year, and they failed to do that as well in the budget that they presented now. In light of the fact that Chairman Frank has indicated that he wants to address the issue at some point in the future with regard to the GSEs, we would hope that the chairman would consider signing on, and he would indicate to the administration that they should not wait for the legislation, but just go forward and implement it nonetheless.
Can you speak to how this drive would affect the budget resolution coming out? Within the budget resolution, would Fannie and Freddie costs as well as liabilities be included when the Democrats put that out? And would this be an issue you would raise? Can you speak to that?
Well, it'll be an issue regardless of whether we raise it or not. The aspect, and I'll let others chime in, I'll do quick. The aspect with regard to the budget per se and the debt would, what the bill does is to say is that debt amount, which is $1.6 trillion, would have to add it to the debt ceiling, and so therefore the bill realizes you cannot do this overnight through the legislative process, so it gives a 90-day window, if you will, for this to be accomplished. But I again open it. Other questions? And over to my left is just a chart to put some of what we're talking about in perspective. It's a chart showing the institutions receiving $10 billion or more in taxpayer bailouts. Goes from Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, of course it's not, they paid theirs back, GMAC, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, the Citigroup, GM, AIG. And finally, you get to what we're talking about, and that's why Ed and others have pointed out that really is what we're talking about here as far as the impact upon the budget is the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two large columns on the right. The first column is OMB, their treatment of the matter as far as how much money is going out the door, and the CBO assessment, which is almost twice as much. The numbers that we're talking about here are roughly around